Hi, this is Michael Waitze, and welcome back to ATP. Today, we are joined by Tsuyoshi Domoto, the founder of Akiya Air. For decades, we have heard that Japan has becoming more business-friendly to foreigners, and now, I think it's finally happening. Yet, most foreigners still don't understand exactly how to do business in Japan, and its real estate market remains a mystery, particularly the fact that millions of homes across the country have been abandoned and sit waiting for new owners, potentially foreigners. Yoshi, thank you so much for doing this. How big is the Akiya problem or the Akiya thing in Japan, and what are the main factors driving this trend?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for having me here. It's really an honor to be part of your podcast.
Thank you.
The Akiya problem is huge. There are currently 9 million abandoned homes throughout Japan.
Wow.
From Hokkaido in the north all the way down to Okinawa in the south. And it is said that this number is actually going to double to 18 million within the next 10 years.
Yeah. But what's driving this? Is it like a falling population? Is it people moving out of these certain areas? Is it urban reinvigoration and that people in the small towns and small cities are moving into big cities? Or is it just a combination of all of this stuff?
Exactly. I mean, that's definitely part of the story. So I guess the main reason is demographic decline and our aging population. So as you know, Japan's birth rate is probably 1.1 something at this point. It's one of the lowest amongst all developed nations, and most of the employment opportunities are in the cities. So there's a one-way migration where people from the countryside come to big urban areas like Tokyo, Osaka, I guess Yokohama and whatnot, but there's no reverse migration going back. So that's part of the reason. Number two, I would say, is inheritance and also ownership complications. So let's just say, your parents, right, own an Akiya. Your asset's going to be split between your siblings. But if one sibling doesn't agree or doesn't want to sell, then you can't sell the entire building.
Right.
So it makes things very, very messy until all family members can come to an agreement. And I would say the third reason is, limited demand and also high renovation costs. So for a lot of like local Japanese folks, when they get married, most prefer to sort of move into a brand new like apartment or build their own house if they have the economic means. The first thought that comes to your mind is probably not, oh, I want to live in an Akiya. You know what I mean? So yeah, and to be honest with you, the renovation costs can add up. So what I tell a lot of my clients is that, hey, you got to be aware that even though the value of the house that you're buying, the value of the Akiya might be super cheap, it's going to cost maybe the entire value maybe 2 times, and sometimes even up to 3, to fully renovate it so that it's in a livable condition.
Got it. So I want to get into the renovation and the architects and stuff like that a little bit later, and maybe what we should do is tell people what aki means and what ya means, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a great question. So aki, the kanji or the Chinese character for aki means open. Or vacant. Yeah. And ya is house. So vacant house is the literal meaning of Akiya. And the government sort of definition or the formal definition of an Akiya is any sort of vacant property that has been left abandoned for over a year. That's like the legal definition of it.
And are people just literally walking away from these houses?
So many of these houses are sort of located in the countryside. Many of them are unfortunately sort of left abandoned. And yeah, previously their owners were probably senior citizens and they could no longer take care of it or run it on their own. So they would move to nursing homes. And then their sons or daughters were like, nope, I'm not moving back to my family house. So they're just kind of like left there. And also actually one important thing I forgot to add earlier is also regarding the land tax. So the incentives are a little bit sort of messed up here in Japan, where it makes more sense, or it's economically more feasible to leave a leave land with a vacant building on top. You only have to pay 1/6 of the land tax, compared to if you were to destroy your house and just leave vacant land, then you have to pay 100% of the land tax. So it incentivizes people to actually leave their homes just vacant and just sitting there
So
for
it's
lower tax reasons.
it's funny you say that. I live in Bangkok, and I
Yep.
see plenty of open land, but on that land, there's generally a shack or like a well-maintained tree. And I think it's for the same reason. I don't know if it's 1/6 or 1/5 or whatever, but the
Yep.
tax treatment is different. So I don't think it's unique to Japan, but it's in
Right.
but it's in Japan as well. So
Exactly.
can I ask you this? So a lot of foreigners, like we know that the tourist numbers in Japan this year are skyrocketing, and that the Japanese government is trying to double or triple those numbers by 2030. Right? So they want more foreigners there. And I think this is a big change in the way the government is dealing with people from other countries, right? But buying real estate in Japan is going to feel complex, I think, to foreigners. And I know because I did it when I was there. All right, I bought a piece of land in Aoyama.
I see. Very
And that
cool.
was fun. But I'd been living there for 15 or 20 years at the time. But how does your platform, or how do you expect the platform to like simplify and support this process so that foreigners can come in and do this in a way that's not so overwhelming?
Right. So I think that, a lot of foreigners face many hurdles when they try to purchase property or land here in Japan. Obviously, there's the language and cultural barrier. Real estate is a very traditional conservative industry. And so just aren't a lot of bilingual agents. You'll find some in Tokyo, right? Or in Osaka or some of the bigger cities.
Sure, Ken
But once you
Corporation,
go
stuff
out,
like that, yeah.
exactly. But once you go out to the countryside, like,
Nobody.
oh man, you're gonna have a really tough time finding like a bilingual agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's very inaccessible. And also, like, if you want to sort of find an Akia, there might be a service provider. If you want to sort of purchase an Akia, or maybe even an apartment or a mansion, you have to go to a real estate brokerage firm. If you want to renovate it, you got to find a renovation company. And then, for property management as well, you got to look for a specialist. And last but not least, if you want to put it up on Airbnb, then you got to look for an Airbnb provider. So all of these steps are just so fragmented. And what I'm trying to do with Akia Air is provide like a one-stop shop, a full stack service where foreigners can do all 5 of these key steps: search, buy, renovate, manage, and monetize, all in one platform.
So can you walk me through what it would look like, just from in a step-by-step basis, if I contacted you or used the platform and I said, I want to buy a piece of property in not the suburbs, but in the countryside around Fukuoka?
In the countryside around Fukuoka. Okay.
Yeah,
great,
just
great,
if
great.
that was my thing that I wanted to do, how would the platform help me? Can you just walk me through that process?
Yeah. So my first recommendation would be obviously to go to akiair.com. And we have this map feature where you can sort of zoom in to specific areas around Fukuoka or in the countryside. And it would map out all the Akiyas that are currently available. And it lists the price, lists the age of the house, lists all the key sort of property details that would be important for you, like number of bedrooms, et cetera, when it was last renovated. And based on that information, we can have a consultation where you can reach out to me and we can go over whether this property would make sense for you or not. Because, I have 2 types of customers, people who see this as an investment opportunity. So they want to just sort of flip it, or not flip it, but they want to quickly renovate it, put it up on Airbnb, and earn an attractive return. Whereas there are others who have this sort of sentimental or emotional connection with Japan, and they want to stay in their own house, their own property every time they come and visit.
Right.
So that's why they want to own a house here.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So once I do that, like financing could be a problem. How does that work too? Because I remember, again, I told you I bought a piece of land in Aoyama and I had a good job. I was working at Goldman Sachs. My salary was decent, but I still had to get my father-in-law to fly up from Nagasaki and sit down in my apartment with the bankers and say, I'll co-sign this. So how does that work?
Right.
What are some of the financing challenges?
Yep. So, financing, unfortunately, from the time you lived in Japan till now is unfortunately still a challenge for a lot of foreigners. So that's why, unless you have PR, a PR which stands for permanent residence, unless you have Japanese PR, it's going to be difficult for you to get a bank loan from a Japanese bank. But I'm not going to write it out. What I'm saying is that it's just a lot more challenging. I have heard of stories of some Chinese customers being able to get a loan from the Bank of China, for example. So that's a possible route. And there are also other banks that I've heard of that are now starting to offer loans to non PR foreigners. So little by little, I think Japanese banks are starting to sort of open up and become more, I guess, accepting or aware that there's actually an opportunity here that needs to be filled.
So I wonder if there's a fintech opportunity for Akia as well to kind of build that into the platform, figuring out a
Yeah, yeah,
way,
yeah,
but
yeah.
figuring out a way to not have a balance sheet per se, but have a way to solve that financing problem for people. I think the people that are probably going to do this are probably going to be wealthy enough to not necessarily pay cash, but maybe raise money in their own country and then at least take a little bit of FX risk to buy in Japan.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's definitely an option. But most of the people that I'm talking to are going to be cash buyers. So they have a certain amount saved up and they're just ready to deploy it, and that actually makes things a lot smoother and easier. And the owners are actually quite happy. People sometimes say, oh, when it comes to, foreigners, Japanese people don't like to, rent their property, and that's true to some extent. We do have some very conservative elderly people who still unfortunately hold prejudice against foreigners, and that's why they don't want to rent out their mansions or apartments to them. But this is a rental situation. When it comes to purchases, they would very much just have cash on hand. So they're actually happy to offer like a discount on their property. If you say, hey, I have a customer, he's American, Canadian, European, Thai or Singaporean, they're ready to pay you upfront, all in cash, and they'll be like, oh wow, okay, sure, I'd accept that deal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if a Thai person was coming to Japan to buy property, they'd probably bring the cash with them.
Yeah, yeah,
But who
exactly.
knows? So, and you mentioned this earlier, but I would presume, right, and all the property that I looked at, and frankly, I've looked at property in the countryside in Fukuoka, to be fair, and a lot of them were Akia. But one of the
Mm,
things that I noticed and I spoke about with the rental agent, I mean the selling agent, was they're going to need to be renovated. And you mentioned this
mm,
earlier. How does the
mm.
platform, how does Akia Air help people figure out who can help them with the renovation, right? And again, there are language issues and stuff like that. But how do you work with people to consolidate who can do this for them and then help them renovate their homes?
Right, right. So, Aki Air is currently just a platform.
Yep.
And so we connect our customers to our key partners. So right now I'm in conversation with, architects, designers, contractors, and I would go and sort of visit their offices, review their past projects, visit some of the site locations of currently ongoing projects, sort of make an evaluation and make sure that these people are, obviously A, legit, and B, they can do the job well. And I have a list of those sort of companies that I could vouch for. And I would share that with my clients and they would sort of pick from that list. So I'm still, currently in the process of creating these connections and relationships at the moment.
And what are some of the challenges there? In other words, are the architects, the building permit people, even maybe the regulators open to this new kind of platform? Because there are plenty of real estate platforms in Japan, right? I know a bunch
Yep.
of them, but none of them are specifically trying to do what you're doing, right?
Mm, mm,
They'll
mm,
basically rent you a condo, they'll sell you a condo, all this kind of stuff. That's what most of them are doing, right?
mm,
But
mm,
not
mm.
all of them are focused on these abandoned homes, right? So,
Right, right, right,
what
right.
kind of response are you getting from people that work in this area but haven't worked on a platform before? If that makes sense.
Right. Actually, I think it's actually a huge opportunity because, the government is actually sort of trying to encourage people to build eco homes. So these are homes that are built with sustainable material. These are homes that have solar panels set up on their roofs, and the Japanese government's actually providing subsidies to such structures. And I think that not enough people are looking in to this opportunity right now, so that's actually a gap that we're also trying to fill as well. Because I think that, especially if you want to live out in the countryside in Japan, you have to be, you have to be an ecologically conscious person. And you want your home to also be very, eco-friendly as well, right? So there's that. And also, on the topic of subsidies, the Japanese government's also paying families with young children to move to the countryside. They're also giving tax subsidies as well. And so we're sort of the way in which the Japanese government's trying to tackle this problem of this one-way migration from rural areas to the urban areas is by incentivizing people to go back, just being like, hey, it's so much cheaper to live in the countryside, and you're surrounded by abundant nature. It's so great. Like, why don't you guys move back?
So this must be a big benefit for Akia, right? If the government is actually encouraging through subsidies and tax benefits for people to essentially buy these properties, right?
Right.
And then not move to the countryside, but is this valid for second homes as well? Like, and I'm actually thinking about myself. Like, if I want to buy this thing, my wife is Japanese, so can she take
Right.
advantage of some of these benefits to actually buy that house at like a cheaper price or with some tax incentives? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. So I do have to say that a lot of them are tied to residency. So you are going to have to register yourself as a resident of that
Yep. No
municipality or
problem.
local government,
Can do.
right? Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So there is that. But then as long as you sort of make that decision that you want to be a permanent sort of resident there, then you are. I believe that in most cases you will be eligible.
Okay. You also mentioned property management. How do you help
Yep.
people? Like, let's say you're a foreigner, you're Chinese, you're Thai, you're Singaporean, you're American, you buy a property in the countryside, you help list it on Airbnb or some other similar service. But I don't want to fly to Japan every month to kind of fix it and clean it and stuff like that. How do you help on the monetization and property management side?
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to property management, there is to simplify things, there's the Minpaku license and the hotel license. So there are two different types of licenses that one can apply for. The Minpaku license would allow you to rent out your property for 180 days out of the year, so half a year. So they expect you to obviously, use your house, live in your house for the other half, and for the remaining days, they allow you to rent it out to other foreigners or other local Japanese folks. The hotel license obviously allows you to do it 365 days, so all year round. But then it's slightly more regulated, more strict. There are obviously, like for example, fire hazards that you have to make sure to set up and be cognizant about. And it's a little bit challenging or harder for one to get. But there are these two types. And of course, for a foreigner that doesn't live in Japan, it's going to be super annoying to have to sort of figure out, hey, like, who is a cleaner that I can depend on, who can come every time a guest checks out and, cleans this property, make sure that's brand new, make sure it's beautiful for the next guest to come, right? So we as local people, we coordinate all of that. Utilities, cleaners, just monthly checkups. We just take care of all of that so that our get clients don't have to worry about that at all.
Got it. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your personal journey, why you started
Sure.
this, where you've come from, and why
Sure.
you've settled on this as an idea, and just the difficulty of starting a business from scratch in Japan.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, it's tough. I'm
Talk
not
to
gonna
me.
lie.
Talk to me. So give me a little bit of a story.
Sure, sure. So I tell people that I have career ADHD. I don't think you've heard of this term before, but I like doing a little bit of everything. And once I feel like I've mastered a subject or an industry, I tend to move on.
You get bored.
Not a good trait. Something I hope I will be able to stop with this real estate industry.
Yep.
But then I started off my career in finance, working for a large investment bank, but realized after 2 years that nope, this was not it. So then I moved to Honduras in Central America. So I joined like a nonprofit organization there that helped farmers with microloans, and we also helped them export their specialty grade coffee to the U.S.
Got it.
So I was a coffee salesman at one point, traveling all over the East Coast, West Coast, carrying sacks of Honduran coffee with me, providing people samples, being like, "Hey, try this. This is great. Try that." Um, But I guess during my time in Honduras, I realized that the root of all poverty was actually the lack of quality education.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
what was holding a lot of people back. So that's what sort of got me into ed tech, education technology. So I went to grad school, studied education technology, got a master's in education technology, and worked for several startups
In the
in
United
the ed
States,
tech
or
field. Actually, for half a year in Brazil, and then I came back to Japan, and I was working for one Japanese startup, but I also started a programming school for young kids as well.
got it.
Um, yeah, so did that for a couple of years, and then most recently, I was working as a sustainability consultant, and this was back in 2023. But yeah, to be honest, I kind of got burnt out. And in 2023, especially the winter, was a very very tough time for me. And so this is not something a lot of Japanese people do, to be honest. But I actually took a career break, and not just like a month, but I actually took 6 months off.
Wow.
So this is like committing career suicide in Japan.
Suicide.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
not everybody will do this. But as a 35-year-old, I moved back in with my parents, who are living in Bangkok actually. So they're retired, they're living in Bangkok. So I moved back in with them, and it was kind of during this time where I finally had the chance to really reflect back on my life and be like, hey, Yoshi, like, what do you really want to do? You
Yeah.
know, like stop focusing on things that you think your parents want you to do, like, or the things that society expects you to do. But like, what gets you up in the morning? Like, what gets you excited? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know yet, but I've always wanted to learn how to code a little bit. You know, that sounds pretty cool, right? So I enrolled in a programming boot camp in Bali, Indonesia. So from Thailand, you know, it was a fairly affordable flight. So I
Yep.
flew over to Bali, enrolled in this boot camp called Lewagon. And it was there where, it was a boot camp that was sort of geared for entrepreneurs, and you had to sort of ship a product, an MVP, within the span of the boot camp. And so after week 4, all of us had a chance to pitch our own unique idea. And around the same time, like CNN released this huge article that said Japan has a huge housing crisis. There's 9 million abandoned homes. And so that's when I was like, oh yeah, like, it
That's
just
the
kind of
thing.
clicked in my head. I was like, so, and many of my peers around me in that boot camp were also digital nomads or entrepreneurs or people in their 30s and 40s who couldn't afford a house back in their home countries.
Right.
So these were like Americans, Canadians, some Europeans, some Australians, Singaporeans. And I was like, wow, like Japan has 9 million abandoned homes. Most of these are fairly affordable. I mean, you do have to fix them up. They're fairly affordable. Why don't I create a platform that makes it easier for these people to buy and live in these houses? And I sort of pitched this idea to my friends and to the community. And many people around me were like, Yoshi, I want to buy. Oh, I want to buy. I want to
So
buy.
so that's what
So,
so that's what I was going to ask you, right? And I'm so glad you came to this spot, because I think, again, with this idea that Japan is becoming more open to foreigners and also more open to digital nomads, when you talk to your friends in Bali that were at this boot camp, what was their response to this?
so, surprisingly to me, they were very excited. Like when you're living in Japan, like yeah, that people are into anime and like manga and stuff like that. But it's only when you kind of leave Japan that you see the strength of Japan's soft power.
Yeah,
And when I was talking to these people one on one, like I realized that, wow, like these people have a true love for Japan. They
they do.
really are serious about wanting to move here and live here. Like they love this country more than the average Japanese person does,
Yeah.
And so I was really honored, but also impressed. And I was like, wow, if I can sort of help them in this journey of relocating to Japan and finding a house, a dream house where they can call their own, like, why don't I be part of this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really great mission. Before I let you go, I want to ask you this as well. Do you see, because you talked about this one-way migration from the countryside into the big cities, and we see this all over the world, actually, right? We see the same thing in Thailand. We see it in Malaysia. We see it everywhere, and I definitely know that that's true in Japan. But do you see Akia Air as contributing to the revitalization of some of Japan's rural areas?
That's what I'm hoping for. I mean, I'm really glad you asked this question, Michael, because what I saw in Bali really shaped my vision of where I want to take this country. So in Bali, I got a chance to sort of explore different parts of the island, and I was just really amazed by how like international it was, or it was becoming.
Yeah.
Like there were people from really all over the world just gathered together, co-working, co-living, co-dreaming. And I was like, man, like this is really unique. This is really special.
Yeah.
If I could replicate this kind of environment in rural Japan, like wouldn't this country become a much better place?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to get at.
And to
Yeah.
be fair, like you said, there are foreigners who love Japan that are so into all of these little minute aspects of Japan, but
Right.
don't think they can afford to live there. Right?
Right.
People are in Bali because they think it's cheap, not because they're necessarily, and Bali's a great place, but not necessarily because they're in love with Balinese whatever.
Yeah.
It's just because maybe it's near the ocean, or maybe they want to surf, or maybe it's just super cheap for them to live there. But there's
That's right.
a whole cohort of people that really love Japanese food, love Japanese movies, love Japanese manga, right? Love a lot of things Japanese, that if they could buy a house and live in Japan, they would definitely do that. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. Tsuyoshi Domoto, the founder of Adhd, thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate all of your flexibility. You've been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it, man. Take care.